Mike, I hope you're having a great day. Explain what that town's going through as they celebrate Drew Brees here there in New Orleans.
Still riding the high wave. It don't take much to have a party down here. Extended one, so to speak. So, it was an electric moment. You think about how he got here, and Ryan, I go back to 2005. This football team was basically flatlined. 3-13, Katrina year, playing games in San Antonio and Baton Rouge. You had an owner that was looking to leave. That was no doubt. I mean, they try to rewrite history with all that, but that was no ifs, ands, buts, and maybes. He was looking real strong at San Antonio. And the league stepped in and sort of changed that outlook. But Drew Brees coming here changed a lot of different things. It changed the trajectory of this franchise, and it certainly changed the trajectory of the Dolphins, who were also eyeing him up with Nick Saban there. And they were a pretty good football team in 2005 with that running game, and I just think about what that would have been had Brees signed with them. And Sean has admitted to us that Drew Brees was not his first choice when he took over here in 2006. He really tried to trade for Tony Romo with the Cowboys. And Tony was the backup to Drew Bledsoe there at that time. The asking price got a little bit too glitzy for him, and they couldn't pull a deal off. So instead, they were kind of jumped into the Drew Brees bidding situation and came down to two teams. And, it could have easily, Drew decided, you know what, man, a 3-13 team, flat on its back, and the area the way it was, and who knows what the long-term future was. He could have easily took that ticket and went to Miami, but instead signed here. And he's gave this team and this franchise a face to the organization, and he's been spectacular. And I think you always tied to a team as a professional when you get selected by them or traded, whatever. You sort of part of it, but you something special when you bring them a championship. And that's what he did in 2009, winning that Super Bowl title. So all the records, when it's going to be all said and done, he'll have all of them. Basically all of the major passing records when it's all said and done. And he's certainly the best football player to ever play for the Saints, and certainly a signature player in NFL history for what he's done to this franchise.
You hear a lot of comparison, and I know it's so hard. I mean, we're talking about the NFL's all-time leading passer, but there's been a lot of comparison that's been drawn, and I don't know if you've said it, but I know that a lot of people that have, that there are some similarities between Tua and Drew Brees. Do you see some of those?
Yeah, his accuracy, his skill set with touch as a passer, and Drew always talks about you got to know where to go with the football. That's something he constantly will bring up. Any interview we've done throughout the years, and a lot of them, he's always brought up the fact that it's so important to know where to go with the football, and I see that certainly with Drew, and you see it with Tua. He knows how to find the open man downfield. He'll do enough, to move left and right to buy a little bit of time. He hits that receiver in stride, and it's off. It's all about accuracy, skills, set as touch-wise, and also the ability to find that open man downfield. And so I've heard other people say that he's kind of a left-handed version of him, and that's very true. And I remember Drew playing when he was at Purdue. Yeah, that wasn't a really good football team at Purdue, but yet he had them in the hunt every year because he was so talented, a passer. And Joe Taylor's offense, Jim Chaney was there, who's now at University of Georgia. And, they had some epic games, Michigan, Notre Dame, you name it. And I think that's a pretty good comparison, both in the college ranks. They have a lot of similarities, but also, too, from a leadership standpoint. And sometimes leadership is not all about hollering and screaming at somebody or getting them excited. It's all about doing your job and, leading by example. And I think Tua's done that, and Drew's very much like that. He's much more vocal today than he was maybe early on in his career. And I think he's felt he's had to be that way to kind of pump himself up. Drew's always talked about tricking his body at 39 years old into work habits and workouts because he trains like an Olympic athlete. And so it's interesting to watch, a guy that can throw the football with that type of touch, that type of accuracy skills. And at the collegiate ranks, there's no one that I see in the college ranks that does it like Drew other than Tua. No one.
Peter Burns put out a tweet, and I got to give credit to him, but I'm going to add to it. You look at 2003, LSU won the national title with Nick Saban. Just a couple of years later, 2007, they won the national title with Les Miles. They were really starting to rock and roll. And if you look at Drew Brees, by him going to New Orleans, that allowed Saban to come back to the University of Alabama, come back to the SEC, in one sense giving them a chance to win championships on the NFL side, but also putting this barricade up in the SEC. What happens if Nick Saban stays in Miami, and do we see LSU reel off all these championships? Because they were really taking a stronghold in the SEC West.
I think the scenario would have been that I think a lot of people sort of felt at one time, Les had eyed Michigan, that somehow, some way, that Les would have left LSU to go to Michigan. And what would have happened if Nick had decided, and Brees had success there with him, and Les had decided to go to Michigan? I think that the climate and the atmosphere in Baton Rouge had changed, where I think Nick could have well ended up here, back at LSU. I don't think there's any doubt. That one maneuver changed the course of history, not only for the Saints, but changed it for the University of Alabama. Because, you think about, I'm not real sure Nick was the absolutely number one choice at that time. There were a lot of people that felt maybe Alabama had extended the olive branch at that time to see if Bill Parcells was interested. And Bill has admitted that he had some talks for a University of Alabama job. But it goes to show one maneuver and how it affected the course of NFL and college football history, with Brees ending up in New Orleans, and then shortly, didn't take long, he felt, hey, listen, college football is where my bread and butter is. I'm headed back, and the top job was at University of Alabama at that time. But there was a lot of people here in Baton Rouge who felt that over a course of time, Saban would return to college football. I had one very prominent LSU individual tell me the day Saban signed with the Dolphins, he's going to be back in college football within 5 years.
Wow. That
he felt that maybe his style of coaching would not fit the pro game very well, and that, he was a magnificent collegiate coach. And he was absolutely right about it. And there was no doubt I think there was certainly some friction in the relationship with himself and also at that time athletic director Skip Bertman.
Mike, let's just
over things that now are being built and done here at LSU that I think that Nick really pushed real hard for and pushed extremely hard. And, Skip maybe didn't feel as though they could go that route at that time. And yet, all of that's being done, either has been done or is being done today at LSU.
Do you think LSU could have done something to keep Nick Saban there? I mean, could they have amped up? I mean, could they have gotten a bidding war and did something to maybe just lock him down? I mean, do you look back and say they could have went out of their way and made sure he didn't go back to the NFL?
To be honest, I had the feeling that he had the itch to give the NFL a try. It's easy to say they could have given him more money, more power, that sort of thing. I just felt at that moment he really wanted to give the NFL a whirl and felt as though he could coach at the NFL level. Because, he had basically done everything that he could do in college football. He'd won a national championship at LSU. He had taken this team from a middle-of-the-road team in the SEC. And that's what LSU was when he took over. They were a middle-of-the-road team in the SEC and won them a national championship. What other mountain was he going to climb? I do think that's the one thing age sort of gets to you after a while. Do you want to restart all that over? But at that time, Nick was a young man, and I think he wanted to give the NFL a try. If it would have been Miami or somewhere else. But, that was a spot, too, where, he grew up sort of similar times where you saw the success of Don Shula and what that meant, to the AFC and having that franchise and them winning big and Super Bowls and everything else. And I think he felt, he could fit into the NFL. But, listen, sometimes it's just not the right fit for you. College football was perfect, and Alabama was the perfect team for him, to be honest, too. He was smart that he wasn't just out there looking to get back in college football at any job. He was looking for a specific spot. And he saw that he could win and win huge at Alabama. It's the same way when he left Michigan State. He told me this story. Here I am at Michigan State. I'm not even the top college in my own state. And so he said, when LSU came a-calling, I took a look at those numbers, and at that time, I think it was 5 out of the last 8 years, Louisiana had produced more professional athletes than any other state per capita in the country. So he said, man, why shouldn't I go down there? But a lot of those guys were leaving. They were going to Miami or Florida. They were going to Florida State, going to Notre Dame, going to Michigan. So the one thing he did, he built the levee. And he kept all those athletes in the state of Louisiana, the top ones. And that's how he built, LSU up and has done a very similar job at University of Alabama. But the other thing he did, and so did Les for a period of time, was the tentacles, as he would call it, the ability to stretch out the recruiting. If it was a top running back here, a top receiver there, a top lineman, to go out and get those guys. That once you built the program, was at another level. And former, Miami coach and Dallas Cowboy coach Jimmy Johnson made the comment to me a couple of years back about this, and he's right. He said, the two things will happen when you have a really successful team in college football, and he said you can bank on it. One, you're going to recruit athletes that would not even give you a second look when you were an okay team or a pretty good team. He said the second thing is get ready that most of those guys are going to leave after 3 years. So he said you got to get ready to replenish your roster quickly. And I think at that time he was trying to tell me, hey, watch what's happening at LSU, because it's similar to what I see happened at Miami. They couldn't replenish the roster quick enough, and the program fell off. Jimmy didn't tell me that, but I think Coach Johnson was actually telling me, watch for it. And that's exactly what happened here. And Nick's done a fantastic job of not letting that happen at Alabama, because you could lose 3 or 4 top players early to the NFL, and, your roster maybe isn't set right. that is I think the most impressive thing in this world today, with juniors leaving early, to get a guy that fill right in and then not having a depth issue, because that comes into play tremendously when you start to lose guys early to the NFL, and it certainly happened here at LSU. And Orgeron's feeling the pinch of it today because of that. I think they're almost back numbers-wise to where they should be, talent depth-wise, but they're not there yet. Got one more recruiting class before I think they could be back.
Hey, Mike, let's talk about Georgia and LSU. That is a game that the nation's eyes, especially in this part of the region, we're going to be dialed into Baton Rouge on Saturday afternoon, 2:30, the CBS game. Give us your thoughts, analysis as we approach that game on Saturday afternoon.
Well, he's cooled off, but I suspect that Coach O he was about as mad as a boiled owl. I mean, you look at how they lost that game, against Florida, and they couldn't pass protect. They had 5 crucial drop passes, 65 yards in penalties in the third quarter, 3 turnovers. The worst tackling performance of the Dave Aranda time frame here. And Ryan, with a couple minutes left to play, they still had a chance to win. I mean, that's amazing. And I think he's kicked himself, and the team has too, for losing that game. And I give Dan Mullen and Grantham a lot of credit. I thought the game plan they had against LSU was outstanding. It was very similar to what he had a year ago at Mississippi State to beat them, and really beat them handily in that stand. But you know what? This is just a gut feeling. But I think they upset Georgia this weekend. I think catching them at home, the one thing Orgeron has done in his time frame there is when his teams have lost, he's got them ready and rared back up to play the following week. And I think this is a razor-close game where a field goal is going to decide it one way or another. And I think catching them in Tiger Stadium, this is a huge test for Georgia to play in this environment. And I know one thing, that defense won't play the same way they did against Florida, because I thought the tackling, they were in position to make a play and couldn't do it. But you can't get over the penalties, the drop passes. And I think the most crucial point, you had a 7-0 lead in the first quarter. You're driving for another score. Joe Burrow's got to understand, with the bear down that was coming on him, he's got to get rid of the football quickly. He can't hold on to the ball like that in a pocket, or he's going to get hit, and it was a strip of a fumble. That changed the course of that football game. But I think the matchups, being at home, and every once in a while you catch a team, right place, right time, right spot. I think LSU's got Georgia in that spot.
Mike, I know it's different, but you were raised in that area. Hurricane Katrina was a Category 5, 175 miles per hour wind. We had 1,800 fatalities, and a lot of that was because of New Orleans, the flooding, and all those situations. 125 billion with a B storm. Something tells me that when you look at these photos on Twitter of what's happening down in what we like to say lower Alabama, a lot of listeners down in that area with Hurricane Michael, it has to remind you of a lot of thoughts that you've been through in the state of Louisiana.
Yeah, Ryan, I've been jackpot lucky. That was a time frame where I was kind of in either to the left or a little bit to the right of like 7 storms in a very short period of time. And I was to the left of Katrina. I had absolutely no damage. I've had none. Now, I live 60 miles south of New Orleans. And in all that time frame, I have had 0 damage at my home. So I've been jackpot lucky, but I've had other people, neighbors, everything else that really went through some difficult times through it. And you got 140-mile-an-hour winds for any length of time. The structure of a lot of these homes are going to come down, and tree damage and everything else. Part of Katrina, certainly, as you brought up, was a man-made situation with the levees breaking and flooding the city. But, man, that that's difficult. Until you've been through that, you don't realize the intensity of that type storm. And we've had it here where the winds were 110, 115, or right around 120. And man, you just see that noise, and that swirl is just unreal. It's hard to describe to somebody when you hear that howl of that hurricane at that level, and you just hope the roof stays on, so to speak. And it's man, my heart goes out to them. Yesterday, and doing a show, Bobby Abear and I do a show on Monday nights, but it got moved because of Monday Night Football. We were doing it in Mississippi. We passed through 6 inches of water on the highway. We could not see the sand or the beach in leading up to the Mississippi casino. So we actually passed in about 5.5, 6 inches of water. It had shoved all that water up right up to the Gulf, and you couldn't tell the road from the Gulf. That's how much water was coming in. So, and that storm wasn't even close, to the Mississippi coastline at that point. So, you just see the intensity of that. It's unbelievable, and man, God bless them, because we've been through it a number of times, and my thing is, man, keep yourself safe. You keep yourself, your family safe. Material things you can get, later on in life, but you got to keep yourself breathing, and that's the most difficult part. A lot of time for people don't want to leave their homes. They don't want to leave things, but you got to save yourself at that point, and your family. You got to keep yourself in that spot. Don't try to trick yourself into believing, oh, well, I lived through one, this one's not going to affect me. We did a show back in 2006 at the Silver Slipper, and Bobby and I ride together for the first time there, and we're looking at all these trees, and about 15 to 18 feet up, there ain't a stitch of bark on the tree. So everybody tells me, he said, man, I don't know what's eating on that bark. I said, nothing eating on that bark. This was ground zero for Katrina. It had peeled the bark off of those trees.
Wow.
Completely from like 18 feet down. And that goes to show you what type of tidal surge that thing came in on. It's unbelievable, Ryan. If for people who haven't experienced it, and not to say that I want them to, but that howl and to see what water can do, the damage and the movement of water is unbelievable. And so hopefully those people around that coastline, man, they got out of there, because they ain't nothing to play around with at all.
College and pro football analyst, WWL, AM and FM there in New Orleans. Mike Detillier on the Twitter account, does a ton of TV work in that area, covers the New Orleans Saints in the NFL and college football. He made the big pick that LSU has got Georgia in the sights and thinks that they could pull off the upset on Saturday afternoon. Mike, we'll talk to you next week. I appreciate your time and hope you have a great weekend, sir.
Thank you, Ron. Appreciate it, bud.